employees under Kamaki. Once the 5 photography administrators became familiar with the entire operation process, Lin Fei added various exchange requirements in the system. As he added his requests, the Misty World began to operate without anyone noticing. Dingling. A crisp bell sound echoed through the thin mist. Everyone instinctively turned to look into the fog. Chapter 299. The era changes with him clang clang clang, accompanied by the sounds reminiscent of the horse bells from a caravan on the ancient T-Horse Road. A gentle breeze dispersed the thin mist before everyone, revealing lush greenery within reach. As the faint mist gradually cleared, a vast and gentle plateau unfolded before the crowd. In the distance, a large caravan-like group was leisurely making its way towards them. Seeing such a poetic scene, Kamaichi couldn't help but shout, "Photographer, hurry, quickly capture this moment." Hearing his words, several dazed photographers instantly awakened from the enchanting scenery. Utilizing their permissions, the photographers rapidly activated their shooting functions. Meanwhile, Tang San and Sanjio, still immersed in the incredible scene before them, also snapped back to reality upon seeing the photographers spring into action. However, the astonishment in their eyes remained unmistakable. Wow, are we sure this is a game? Yeah, why do I feel like I've stepped into a new world? This scene is even more thrilling than playing a game. Indeed. Third brother, do you think the work environment that President Lin mentioned could be here? As if struck by a thought, Sanjio turned to Tang San and asked. Although it sounded like a question, he had already convinced himself that this was likely the new work environment. The mere thought of working in a game, especially in such a marvelous setting, made his heart race with excitement. Compared to Sanjio, who was a few years younger, the typically composed Tang San couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement as well. No man could resist the allure of such a world, especially with the possibility of witnessing the entire process. Just thinking about it was exhilarating. However, just as they were getting carried away with their excitement, Lin Fei spoke up again, dropping a bombshell on the two. You two, don't just stand there. I've added permissions for you. You now have the authority to write the stories of the game world. Now, it's up to you to unleash your creativity. What? Upon hearing Lin Fei's words, Tang San and Sanjio's faces could no longer hide their shock. They never imagined they would have such a power to shape history in their lives, even if it was just a permission within a game world. Yet, the reality-like world before them made them feel like true masters of their fate in an instant. It must be said, this newfound right to write others' destinies was truly refreshing, and instinctively, they began to explore their capabilities. Before long, they learned about the privileges and functions of being a game administrator from the projection interface. After grasping their newfound powers, the two were left utterly speechless in shock. Third brother, why do I feel like I'm dreaming? At that moment, Sanju nudged Tang San with his shoulder, his expression one of disbelief. Tang San listened and still looked stunned, responding subconsciously, yes. This administrator function is simply beyond human capability. What do you mean? Sanju asked, puzzled. This thing is simply not something a person can do. Tang San's mind raced quickly. He felt that the authority to write the plot as an administrator could be described as the god of fate in this world. However, instead of feeling happy about it, he grew more aware of the heavy burden that this ability carried as he pondered deeply. Previously, in the studio, he could just write simple plots. But now, through the administrator interface he had just seen, he realized that this seemingly enjoyable job was actually exhausting. Not to mention anything else, just editing the personal fate paths was enough to give him a headache. He never expected that with a change in work environment, the workload would also increase. Just then, the group of hundreds had already arrived in front of them. Without considering anything else, everyone instinctively began to assess the entire team. What caught their eyes was a group of young men and women, and on the heavily loaded carts, there were quite a few children of about the same age. The entire group had no elderly people, appearing quite lively. However, these people seemed to have traveled a long way, enduring hardships along the journey. Although they did not show any signs of fatigue, they still gave off a sense of being worn and weary from the road. At that moment, the man at the front of the group stepped forward and knelt on one knee in front of Lin Fei, saying, "Respected Lord, we heard that you need subjects here. We wonder if we could join your territory." Upon hearing this, Lin Fei and the others felt it was a bit strange, but none of them were surprised. Earlier, in the settings, Tang San and the others had already established the starting plot for this group. Thus, Lin Fei and the others were not overly astonished by the group's origins. The man in charge was named Fu Minghan, an adventurous pioneer who, dissatisfied with the tyranny of the former kingdom, had led a group of like-minded friends to rebel and travel thousands of miles in search of a new land. The plain where Lin Fei and the others were located was the destination of this group. Welcome to you all. I am willing to accept every one of you. But as you can see, there is nothing here. Lin Fei thought for a moment and replied in an official tone, adding, however, I can tell you that the land here is very fertile. Upon hearing this, Fu Minghan, who was getting up, said without hesitation, Respected Lord, please rest assured. Our team has talents in various fields. I guarantee that within a year, we will turn this place into a prosperous capital. Welcome to join us. Lin Fei nodded in response. Seeing Lin Fei nod, Fu Minghan finally stood up and began to introduce the main members of the team to Lin Fei. As he had said, the entire team consisted of talents from various fields. During this period, the most shocked were undoubtedly Tang San and Sanjiu. The arrival of the team was indeed something they had set up, but they had never considered the personnel configuration within the team. What shocked them even more was that if they discarded their thoughts about the game world in their minds, everything before them became incredibly real. Especially with the seamless communication with the people in the convoy, it was hard to believe that these were actually NPCs from a game world. The two of them widened their eyes in surprise, staring at Lin Fei. Even if they racked their brains, they couldn't figure out how the other party accomplished this. Hee. Isn't it amazing? Don't you feel like you've entered a new world? Just then, Kamaki walked up to the two of them, empathizing with their feelings. When I first saw the boss conjure countless magical beasts out of thin air, I felt as if I was witnessing a divine being. If I hadn't known this was a virtual world, I might have even knelt. Although I don't understand computers, I know that our boss has mastered technology that humanity has yet to grasp. The era may very well change with this man. Chapter 300. Just one word, awesome. In the future era, whether things can change with this man is unclear to Tang San and his companion. However, at this moment, they are very aware that the culture of virtual reality may unleash a terrifying wave due to the appearance of this man. It is only at this moment that they realize what kind of technology Lin Fei possesses. Both of them even unanimously agree that Lin Fei represents a catastrophic disaster for the global gaming market in the field of virtual reality. At this moment, they feel immensely proud to be among the founding employees of the Player Nation. At the same time, their admiration for this young man, who has shown them kindness, grows even stronger. They not only want to write history within the game, but also wish to see Player Nation create myths in reality. Completely captivated by the virtual art before them, the two are now fully immersed. Compared to Lin Fei and his group, those like Fu Minghan, who have gained residency and development rights, also wear smiles on their faces. This smile is like water lilies finally resting on the shore. Gaining residency means they can finally end their nomadic, unsettled lives. From now on, they will live on this land with a new identity, as pioneers, completely severing ties with their former great kingdom. This group of newly identified migrants seems to cherish this hard-won opportunity. They quickly spring into action. The horses are set free to graze and run on the plains. Dozens of covered carts are simultaneously unveiled. The carts carry various tools and simple building materials. Fu Minghan organizes everyone to start working. At this moment, the entire team becomes busy. No one shows any signs of fatigue. Even the children are all smiles. Soon, Fu Minghan and the others use wooden poles and tarps from the carts to construct temporary shelters resembling huts. The women begin to set up fires for cooking, while the men split into two groups. One group clears and cultivates the land, planting the areas, while the other reattaches the empty carts and heads to the nearby hills with tools. The entire process leaves Tang San and his companions in awe. Watching this scene, they can't help but think of a classic game, Age of Empires, and it's as if it's running at 10 times speed. The busy figures seem tireless, almost as if they have boosters under their feet, dazzling them with their energy. Seeing such a miraculous scene, everyone becomes astonished. Lin Fei, noticing their expressions, explains, "This is another setting of the game world, which I call time flow rate. After all, going from existence to non-existence takes a long time." Upon hearing his explanation, expressions of surprise appear on everyone's faces, and some instinctively begin to try it out. After running and jumping, they found that their movements were still as usual, without any changes. This situation not only puzzled everyone. Faced with the confused expressions of the crowd, Lin Fei generously explained, "The setting of the flow of time only changes the game world, while our identities here belong to outsiders." There was no need for him to elaborate further, as relief appeared on everyone's faces. While marveling at the powerful features of the game world, they couldn't help but admire Lin Fei's creativity. However, they had no idea that these things were not set by Lin Fei. But for now, everyone believed he had mastered a brand new virtual technology, and they didn't think much about other things. Everything before their eyes was progressing in an orderly manner. Compared to those rushing around, Lin Fei and the others watching from a distance felt like gods observing the human world. They watched as low wooden houses formed before their eyes and seeds were planted in the fields, sprouting green shoots. The outline of what was once a barren plain town began to take shape, and everyone became incredibly excited. They had never dared to dream that one day they would witness a town coming into existence from nothing. With the basic needs of the residents met, the entire scene returned to normal. In just over 10 minutes, the dilapidated shantytown transformed into a small wooden town. Wow, this is so amazing. I swear, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it was real, exclaimed Sanjiu, wide-eyed as he looked at the Western-style town before him. Yeah, even if I were to write a novel, I wouldn't dare to write it like this, Tang Xin remarked beside him. Honestly, watching this is even more shocking than seeing something appear out of thin air, said Komachi, who began searching for filming spots while admiring the town that resembled his hometown's Western style. His documentary would start from this town, recording everything here. My lord, your residence is ready, said Fu Minghan, approaching them, a hint of guilt on his face as he continued, due to the lack of materials. We could only build a simple residence for you and the gentleman for now, please. It's fine. I don't really care about the accommodation. As long as there's a place to stay, you can go ahead and be busy, Lin Fei replied. It was more fitting to call it a manor than a lord's residence. Of course, at this time, the manor had no walls or castles. All that existed were fences to keep wild animals out and 2 rows of wooden houses, which made it look more like a farm than a manor. However, Lin Fei and the others had no complaints about this. With a place to stay, they began discussing their next plans. I think this population is simply not enough. While we add more people, we also need to set up the inclusion of some technological talents, suggested Tang, which was a good idea. If these people want to develop into an empire, it might take hundreds of years. Even with the concept of time flow, I think it will still take a long time. Creating characters is something that both Tang San and I excel at. We can come up with various character designs. I suddenly realized that we know nothing about STEAM technology. What should we do? We may not understand, but we still have the internet. Lin Fei, who had been a mere observer, couldn't help but remind everyone. Upon hearing his reminder, everyone finally reacted. That's right. They don't understand STEAM technology, but surely the internet does. Thinking of this, countless great ideas popped up in everyone's minds. Meanwhile, Lin Fei, sitting aside, felt extremely satisfied seeing their enthusiasm. At this moment, he felt like he had found the feeling of being a carefree manager again. He had already granted the permissions, and he had brought the people in. Now, everything was in the hands of these subordinates, and he just needed to make the final decisions. This feeling of setting a general direction and leaving the rest to others was simply delightful. Chapter 301. Treated as land in the new era. On January 1st, 2001, Fu Minghan became the leader of the new immigrants and was appointed as the governor by Lin Fei. With the establishment of towns, the first city on this new continent finally welcomed its initial prosperity. This small town, which had initially taken shape with a blend of Baroque and Gothic architectural styles, finally saw its first wave of new immigrants thanks to Fu Minghan's relentless efforts. The streets of Otan were no longer desolate. At this time, they were bustling with people, beginning to show signs of cultural characteristics. The Otan Plain is located to the northwest, and just a few dozen kilometers south of the city lies an endless sea. As immigrants continued to arrive from overseas, the rapid population growth led to the emergence of coastal towns along the distant coastline. However, the growth rate of the population in these coastal towns far exceeded everyone's expectations. In just over a year, the coastal areas could no longer meet the living and developmental needs of the large population. After discussions between Governor Fu Minghan and his bureaucrats, the homeless immigrants began to move further inland. Thus, small towns sprang up like mushrooms along the route between Otan and the coast. As the continent continued to be developed, Otan became an important center of this new land. Its significance and status naturally strengthened. Ultimately, in the 4th year of the new continent, Otan became the largest city on this land, even showing signs of evolving into a kingdom. Compared to the overall development of the continent, Otan had undergone a tremendous transformation. The current Otan was no longer the makeshift refuge it once resembled, nor was it simply a small western town with a few log cabins. After Lin Fei and others reviewed a large amount of information, it became clear that the architectural style of the entire city of Otan was characterized by grandeur and magnificence. At first glance, the entire city appeared to be composed of sharp stone towers. Each building was constructed by fusing Gothic and Baroque styles. The most representative structure in the city stood tall in the center, rumored to be a sacred and inviolable palace, though no one had ever seen inside. However, when passing by, one could see a very wide corridor leading to the interior. This broad corridor connected the city center with that building. Its most notable features were its towering height and magnificent appearance, adorned with exquisite and luxurious designs. The top of the corridor boasted graceful arches made of transparent crystal. When sunlight shone through the crystal, it not only illuminated the corridor, but also created a colorful rainbow effect. From a distance, it appeared incredibly resplendent, especially when paired with the splendid decorations inside the corridor and the colorful marble on the ground. This mural-filled corridor became the most beautiful sight in the entire city. However, this magnificent and colorful corridor is heavily guarded. The long spears of the guards and the swords at their waists deter everyone from approaching. As time goes on, this corridor, resembling a massive work of art, gradually becomes a sacred place in people's hearts. At the same time, a legend circulates among the locals, saying that behind this corridor, in the palace, resides the highest deity of this land. It is this deity who grants them the most fertile land and a life of favorable weather. This legend is clearly exaggerated. However, it does not prevent people from holding a deep reverence for the unknown. Therefore, on the first day of the 7th year in the new land, the residents of Auden spontaneously organized a procession, bringing various noble fruits to the front of the corridor, offering tributes in hopes of a prosperous year. Brother San, why don't we tell Mr. Lin that we should show ourselves? It's not right to be worshipped as a land deity like this. At the end of the corridor, Sanju looked at the residents making offerings with an uncomfortable expression. Indeed, who would feel at ease being treated as a deity? Hearing his words, Tang San, sitting in a chair, put down his notebook. He glanced at the crowd at the end of the corridor and couldn't help but show a helpless expression. No one could have imagined that, as the outside world developed in reverse, they had been turned into deities by those people. It was only at this moment that he understood Lin Fei's feelings back in the world of Tianpu. Being regarded as a god indeed feels quite satisfying. However, he knew very well that he merely possessed godlike abilities in this game world. When he leaves this world at the end of the day, he is still just him, one among the many in the world. Suddenly, he thought of a deeply unsettling question. In this virtual world, which closely resembles reality, the programmers like him are seen as all-powerful gods by the natives. So, when he returns to the real world, is the reality he inhabits truly real? Are there also programmers in that world who hold the highest privileges, just like Lin Fei? It proves that some questions are best left unexamined. If you truly get caught up in such dilemmas, you might be trapped in them for a lifetime. Clearly, Tang Sen now stood at the edge of this abyss. At any moment he could fall in. Fortunately, at that moment, Sanjio, who had been silent, spoke up again. Brother San? Brother San? Sanjio's calls jolted Tang San awake from his reverie, instantly breaking him out in a cold sweat. What's wrong? Tang San raised his head in confusion. Sanjio looked speechless and said, I was wondering, should we have Fu Minghan explain this? It feels so uncomfortable being worshipped as a god. Upon hearing Sanjio's question again, Tang San did not show the previous helplessness, but instead furrowed his brows, seemingly deep in thought. Just as Sanjio was becoming impatient, he spoke up. No need, I think this is quite good. After finishing his words, he vaguely explained that in this world, it's better for fewer people to know about our existence. I think it's best for us to remain as observers. Sanjio clearly hadn't considered the issues that Tang San was thinking about, so he was somewhat confused by the response. He looked up at the crowd outside, opened his mouth to say something, but ultimately closed it again. After a long time, he finally expressed his dissatisfaction, saying, Hey, I'm starting to envy those who can go out and enjoy the scenery while we are stuck here every day. Meanwhile, Tang San had unknowingly started doodling in his notebook again. The messy handwriting and chaotic lines looked like a tangled mess at first glance. But if you looked closely, you would see that they were interconnected mind maps. Above those mind maps, there was a prominent title, Chronicles of the New World. Chapter 302. The Chronicle of the New Continent, the Kingdom of Kabijiade, known for its mystery and power, has faced discontent within its royal family ever since the outsider, who is now King Jayad III, ascended to the throne. Rumors circulate among the people that this monarch obtained his position by harming his own brother's family. Throughout history, the struggle for royal power has often been marked by bloodshed. Although this is merely a rumor, a growing number of people have come to believe it. The mysterious disappearance of the Baika Duke's family further corroborates these claims. Not long after King Jayad III's coronation, the kingdom began experiencing a population decline, which soon reached the king's ears. As investigations unfolded, the kingdom's ministers discovered that the missing civilians were last seen along the coastal areas of the North Sea. This matter quickly garnered the attention of the royal ministers. However, King Jayad III appeared indifferent to the situation. Nevertheless, to appease the palace officials, he sent out a search party to sea. In the year 388, under mysterious guidance, Fu Minghan and a group of refugees finally arrived at the new continent. During their exploration, they discovered a fertile plain located several dozen kilometers from the coastline. With the landowner's approval, Fu Minghan and the refugees began to establish a new home. As they constructed their town, they found many rare plants and abundant resources on this new land, realizing that it was a place suitable for long-term habitation. Consequently, Fu Minghan organized all the people to rapidly develop their new homeland. With the establishment of Aoduan, everyone entered a fervent period of development. By the end of 388, thanks to the efforts of Fu Minghan and others, the town named Aoduan was finally completed. To commemorate this day, they agreed to designate it as the first day of the first year in the new continent calendar. Thus, the world came to recognize the year of Aoduan. On January 2nd, year 1 of Aoduan, having their own town and land, Fu Minghan and his companions were no longer wandering refugees. For the development of the town, he did not hesitate to send people back to their original continent, to shelter refugees and recruit labor. In April of year 1 of Aoduin, with the arrival of the first batch of new settlers, Aoduin entered a full-fledged development phase. More and more new settlers joined, and Fu Minghan, as the leading figure, was elected as the first governor. By June of year 8 of Aoduin, the town had taken shape and faced its first crisis. A fleet from an unknown continent discovered this rich new land and uncovered the reasons behind the disappearance of the civilians. To gain favor with King Jayad III, the fleet's commander, Leo, devised a plan to seize this continent. He dispatched multiple teams to start harassing the coastal towns. Although Aoduin was thriving, it found itself powerless against the strong fleet's disturbances. The overall combat capability of the entire continent is insufficient, and it has become evident. 3 is indeed impressive. This story wraps up nicely. Looking at the hastily written notes in Tang San's hand, Sanjiu praised. Initially, to satisfy a certain request, they only briefly thought of a character introduction for Fu Minghan. However, they did not assign him a clear identity. Later, as Otan developed into a city, they felt it was necessary to establish an identity for this man. Naturally, this task fell onto the two of them. Afterward, they agreed that this matter would be handled by Tang San, while Sanjiu would define the profession and mentor. What Sanjiu did not expect was that the conflict would arise so quickly. Once you finish writing this, I'm afraid that guy Fu Minghan will come over for help soon. Sanjiu said with a troubled expression, your setting seems to be wrapping up, but I'm still not done here. As he spoke, he grabbed a pile of drafts on the table, feeling a headache coming on. Although the development of the entire world does not require them to set things up specifically, they only need to add stories and conflicts. However, some settings can be quite challenging. Just like the profession drafts in front of Sanjiu, he had already discarded countless ideas. I think the entire concept of the gunslinger and battle medic is quite good. Placing the notebook on his lap, Tang San began to sift through the discarded drafts, and 2 of the settings caught his interest. The gunslinger's entire concept is somewhat monotonous. You could add some subclass options, such as dual wielding or sniping, or gunblade. As for the battle medic, I think it doesn't need changing, but the details need to be refined. Hearing Tang San's words, Sanjiu's eyes lit up, and he couldn't help but say, then, according to what you said, shouldn't we also refine our warrior profession into several branches? For example, tank, damage dealer, or great sword, spear. As the saying goes, a word can awaken the dreamer. With the discussion, Sanjiu's thoughts became clearer, and countless ideas sprang up. Fearing he would forget again, he quickly picked up paper and pen to write down his thoughts. Medic, item medic, pure healer. Assassin medic, melee dagger damage dealer. Psychic medic, status and mental magic attack. Warrior, sword and shield warrior, meat shield. Two-handed warrior. Gunslinger, long gun, handgun, gunblade. Elementalist, wind, fire. Thunder, ice. Hey. Isn't the elementalist a bit over the top? Seeing the other person getting more and more excited, and even introducing the elementalist, Tang San hurriedly reminded him. According to the chronicle he had set, this continent does not yet possess magic or such abilities. As for mental magic, it is merely a manifestation of individual mental strength. If wind, fire, and thunder appear, then is it still the steam age? Hearing Tang San's words, Sanjiu finally realized he had gotten carried away. But 3, don't you think it's monotonous without magic? How about we add a little into it? Tang San, hearing this, shot a glare at Sanjiu and said, if you want to get scolded, don't drag me into it. He rolled his eyes and continued, besides, if we don't want it to be monotonous, we don't have to add magic. Can't you use your brain? I really don't know how you write your novels. While speaking, Tang San wasn't idle. He opened his notebook to a new page and started sketching. Seeing this, Sanjiu curiously leaned over to look at his diary. When he saw the content and simple sketches, he was completely stunned and couldn't help but exclaim, wow, you can actually play like this? Looking at the content in the notebook, Sanjiu felt genuine admiration in his heart. 3 brother is indeed 3 brother. This idea is amazing. Chapter 303, The Puppeteer. The beloved child the puppeteer Lina was born with extraordinary mental strength, but she was frail and sickly since childhood, struggling to move. She could only learn about the outside world through family stories. One day, her father returned home from an outing, bringing her a set of exquisite puppet gifts. However, he informed her that these puppets were discarded props from a puppet theater. Upon learning the truth, Lina declared to her father, I will fix them and make them move again. Her father merely chuckled at the words of a child, not taking them seriously. Yet, unexpectedly, the renowned puppeteer of the continent, Lina, began her legendary life with a few broken puppets. Looking at the few lines of introduction in the diary, Sanjiu's eyes sparkled. A puppeteer. Wow, brother, you're impressive. Sanjiu praised without reservation and hurriedly recorded the brief introduction. At this moment, he decided that this puppeteer would be his beloved child. As time passed, the career setup in Sanjiu's notebook became more refined. After careful consideration, he decided to set 4 professions. The warrior, an essential class in any game, would have unique styles in clothing and weapons. Besides the warrior, there was the gunner, the primary range damage dealer in the game, especially the sniper, who possessed terrifying lethality. To add uniqueness, Sanjiu included a cannoneer branch within the gunner class. As the name suggests, the cannoneer fights with heavy artillery. The cannoneer has immense damage and area attack capabilities, though a bit slower in speed. Nevertheless, Sanjiu believed many would choose this branch. After all, who wouldn't want to shout, "Second Company Commander, you're Italian cannon"? In a game with melee and ranged combat, there must also be a support role. The item master was a name Sanjiu settled on after much thought and research online. This profession is not just a healer. It also possesses certain damage capabilities and uses various items to enhance teammate statuses. Lastly, the profession he favored most was undoubtedly the puppeteer, which might very well become his beloved child's profession. For the puppeteer, Sanjiu set up two branches, one for remote mental support and the other, his favorite, summoning. The summoning profession of the puppeteer can not only create puppets but also endow them with characteristics of various classes, such as warrior puppets, gunner puppets, and so on. Choosing the puppeteer means playing all professions by oneself. Of course, while the puppets can mimic all classes, they still fall short compared to the real ones in various aspects. However, this does not diminish the strength of the puppeteer. In the 10th year of the new land, the expedition fleet discovered the news of a new continent, which finally reached the kingdom of Kabagard. Upon hearing about the abundant resources of this new land, King Guard III and the royal ministers immediately dispatched a fleet to prepare for the occupation of this fertile territory. As the news spread, the inhabitants of the new continent of Auden began to feel anxious. These people, who had left their homes in search of a new life, did not wish to return to a life of wandering and hardship, so they took up arms and organized militias. However, these militias were no match for the regular army. In just one landing battle, the southern coastline of Auden fell. In an instant, the entire southern coastal region of Auden was engulfed in flames of war, leaving the people in dire straits. Upon receiving reports from his subordinates, Governor Fu Minghan was furious. Ultimately, in resignation, he walked through the grand corridor into the central fortress of Auden City. All the citizens were watching closely. Not long after, Governor Fu returned from the fortress and issued several orders. He also instructed the establishment of guilds and a task center for professions, places that had never been heard of before. As time passed slowly, while the people were filled with doubt, a group of unfamiliar humans arrived in Auden City. Wow, everyone, can you believe it? I actually came to a new map. The rise of the player kingdom ignited a wave of game streamers in the real world. In the past, game streamers might have faced starvation on their streaming journeys. However, since the emergence of the player kingdom, this phenomenon has disappeared. Now, even a small streamer on a niche platform can earn income as long as they stream games from the player kingdom. Even if the earnings are not substantial, they certainly won't starve. While they may not feast on lavish meals, they won't be reduced to eating scraps either. At this moment, a streamer named Lu Daodu, with big eyes wide open like a water buffalo, stared in shock at the unfamiliar city before him. His small streaming room, with only a few dozen viewers, instantly exploded with comments. Wow, streamer, did you change games? What the heck? I was almost asleep, and then you pull this? Damn, what a shocking discovery. Where the heck is this place? What the hell? I looked away for just a moment, and you teleported away? Compared to the astonished viewers, a small portion of the audience was more direct. Daodu, hurry up with the strategy guide. I'm logging in right now to check it out. Yeah, Daodu, quickly make a strategy guide. You're about to blow up. Stunned in place, Lu Daodu saw the barrage of comments in his chat and instinctively wanted to share his previous actions. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly realized something and quickly retracted his words, putting on an innocent expression and saying, "Folks, do you believe me if I say I don't know? To be honest, I'm just as confused about how I got here." Lu Daodu felt that what she said might not satisfy the viewers in the live stream. So she quickly added, "I only remember receiving a task in the mechanical city. That guy gave me a letter, and after I delivered it to the place, it just sent me here." The response from the host Lu Daodu was clearly met with skepticism by the viewers in the chat. "Are you treating me like a 3-year-old? Who would believe that? You're just trying to fool everyone. Hurry up and explain, or I might unfollow." However, the threatening comments from the viewers did not scare Lu Daodu. Instead, she showed a more helpless and innocent expression. "I'm telling you all, I'm really wronged. You know that tasks in the mechanical city are usually triggered randomly. I just happened to take on this task without knowing what was going on." Chapter 304. The streamer is worth a basket of eggs no matter how Lu Daodu explained. The viewers in the live stream room just didn't believe it. The flood of messages from the audience undoubtedly increased the popularity of the live stream. As the popularity slowly grew, the heat of the live stream also began to rise little by little. In the past, Lu Daodu's live stream, while not at the very bottom, was still among the lower ranks in the entire gaming livestream sector. However, today was different. With the rising heat of the live stream, his ranking started to climb up. 500, 400, 300, 200. When his live